switching to the recording soon. It is now recording, so we have launched. So once again, welcome to everyone to the Earth Day at Home webinar series. We are in week 5, where tonight we will have Amy Rowe talking about the environmental impacts of food waste. If you've come to these sessions before, you kind of know how it works, but if anybody has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We will be stopping every so often to ask a couple of questions of Amy, or answering the questions as soon as we can if we're able to in the chat. We are with Rutgers Cooperative Extension, myself, Amy Rowe, and myself being Steve Yerjo, excuse me, Amy Rowe and Michelle Backus. The Earth Day at Home series came about because we wanted to reach out to everybody to be able to give them things they could do at home starting around Earth Day. So Earth Day's message being to think globally but act locally, and since the current situation that's in the world, we're all locally at home, we figured we'd give people some pointers as to what they can do at home to help protect the environment and maintain sustainability. Our webinar series is on Mondays, except for next week being Memorial Day on the 25th. Our next talk will actually be on Tuesday, the 26th at 6:30. So once again, next week's session will not be on Monday. It will be on Tuesday, the 26th of May at 6:30. So same time, just a day later because of the holiday. I will hopefully remind everybody of that at the end as well, just so you guys are aware of that. As I mentioned, we are with Rutgers Cooperative Extension. Rutgers Cooperative Extension is the outreach arm of Rutgers University. So we take everything that's kind of researched and studied and taught at the university, and we bring it down to the local level. So we all are involved with different counties. Amy is involved with Essex and Passaic Counties. I work in Ocean and Atlantic counties, and Michelle works in Union and Middlesex counties. So there are other people who deal with other counties throughout the state, but we kind of take the information from the university and bring it down to the public and do it through outreach efforts like this webinar series. So just to let everybody know also, just a couple of housekeeping things. You are muted on entry, so the best way to converse with us is through the chat feature, so please use that wisely. We will also be conducting a poll at the end and asking you guys a couple of questions, get your thoughts on the webinar and the topic tonight. So we will let you know when that comes up. When it opens, you can just click on your answers and make sure at the end that you click submit. Otherwise, it doesn't count that you've answered those questions. So please remember at the poll to click on submit to submit your answers to us. And the other thing that we would like to ask of people is that we are offering this program for free, but these sessions, like I said, are free, but please consider giving a donation to our program. Any amount that you can offer would be greatly appreciated. I know that, current situation, it may be tough, but donations are greatly appreciated to help us do other events like this and to continue on. You can do it through the Rutgers Environmental Steward Program, and we will be putting the link in the chat box so that you can actually just click on the link and get directly to the donation page. And any donations and funding provided helps to support our volunteer efforts, including internships, scholarships, supplies. One thing that we ask is that when you make that donation that you just put the phrase Earth Day in the notes when donating. So we will make sure to get that link up on the chat so everybody can see that. So like I said, tonight we're doing the 5th in our series on Earth Day at Home, and tonight we were talking about the environmental impacts of food waste. And Amy, you are set to go.
Okay, well, thank you, Steve. Thank you, everybody, for joining us on this beautiful evening. So I am going to be talking about environmental impacts of food waste and reducing food waste at home. But first, I'd like to thank my colleague and partner, Sarah Elnakib. She is our food policy and food systems guru, and she will be helping answer questions, and I have her contact info at the end if you have any questions related to those kinds of things. But I'm going to focus on the environmental impacts. So because this is part of the Earth Day at Home webinar. So let's just get started. I am the environmental agent for Essex and Passaic Counties. So if you guys need me, my info will be on at the end as well. So let's move forward. Hopefully you can all see my slides. So let's talk about some food waste facts. I'm sure you guys are well aware that food waste is a huge problem in the world and in the U.S., but approximately 30 to 40% of food produced ends up as food waste. That is the equivalent of each person in the U.S. wasting nearly 300 pounds of food per year, which if you really wanted to figure out how tangible that is, that would be each person wasting 29 Thanksgiving turkeys. That's a lot of turkeys wasted, right? So 30 to 40% of our food produced ends up as food waste, which is equivalent to throwing away more than $160 billion per year. Just think of money going directly in the trash. And it's not just the food being thrown away that is expensive. The cost of throwing that food away is also expensive. So the cost of trucking it to landfills, landfill services, all of that also costs an additional $2 billion per year. So this is a huge issue. There are a lot of environmental impacts, which we will talk about later, but just wanted you to know what we're up against and how we're going to try to fight this. So let's talk about the difference between food loss and food waste. I don't know if you guys have heard these two terms as separate things, but it's really where the loss is happening in terms of the food chain and the food supply system. So food loss is usually food that's wasted during production and processing. So this is often still in the agricultural land, in the agricultural processing, and also in the distribution of that food. So food waste is occurring at the retail and consumer level, at the consumption, down at the consumer. So usually at that time, food is of good quality, but it's discarded before or after spoilage. And so really this is just a division, food loss versus food waste, but at the end of the day, it's food that's not being eaten. It doesn't really matter why. It's all food that's not being consumed and not being used in the way that it was intended to be. So just keep that in mind. You may hear the terms food loss versus food waste, so just wanted to clear that up. But really, it's food that's being wasted regardless of where it is in the food chain. So let's start to talk about environmental impacts. So 30% of all the farmland in the U.S. ends up going to food waste. So think about all of those crops, all of that livestock being raised, ending up just in the trash. We are wasting all of that agricultural labor, all of the distribution, all of those things, all of that farmland is going to grow food that is ending up wasted and in our landfills. So let's look at a typical food system wasting in terms of each step of the way. So if we have 100 apples at a beautiful orchard, let's say that they're growing, they're in the orchard, the apples are doing good, they need to be harvested, but of those 100 apples that we have, 20 of them are wasted. Either they're not picked due to labor issues, due to pest issues, due to spoilage, or just not having the demand. Sometimes farmers let their crop rot in the field because they don't have people to purchase it. So 20 of our 100 apples are wasted at the orchard where they haven't even been moved from the land that they were growing from. So then we have post-harvest. Here, we are only losing about 3 of those 100 apples. So this could be apples that are not up to standards. Maybe they have a shape issue, maybe they have some damage. Then we go off to packaging and processing. We're only losing about 1 of those apples out of 100, so that's pretty good. But again, this could be damage, this could be pest issues. There could just be some standards and not quite up to quality. So again, this is food loss. The first three steps here, the orchard, post-harvest, and packaging processing, this is food loss. Then we get to the grocery store. So this is on the retail and the consumer level now. So at the grocery store, about 12 of those apples are wasted. And so this is possibly because of oversupply. Maybe they're overripe because no one purchased them. They've just gotten to a quality that the store can't sell them. Maybe they're just what's left after being stacked on each other. There's damage. There's all kinds of reasons that they are not being sold. So then at the consumer level, 28 of our 100 apples are wasted. And so again, this is because maybe the consumer bought too many before they were, before they were good to eat and they started to go bad. Maybe they were stored improperly. Maybe they were just forgotten about in the refrigerator or wherever they were stored. And so at the grocery store and at the consumer level, this is food waste. So out of our 100 apples, only 36 were not wasted. So that is a lot of waste in your typical system. And again, this came from Purdue University. This is a typical agricultural system and getting that food into our supply line and to the consumer. So this is just your average example of what's happening in the U.S. in terms of our food system and where all of our produce is ending up. So only 36 out of 100 are not wasted. That's not very good. So what are the environmental impacts of all of this waste? So 25% of all of the U.S.'s freshwater use goes to food waste. That's a lot of water. A lot of our fossil fuels are going to food waste as well. Think about all of the oil that needs to be used to grow that food, to make that fertilizer, to raise that livestock, to get that food from the farm down to the consumer. So that's 300 million barrels of oil per year. So 3% of the U.S. domestic use, which doesn't sound like a lot in total, but if you think about our oil supplies and our reliance on fossil fuels, it would be great to eliminate that. Then another thing that is impactful in terms of environmental issues with regard to food waste is that 22% of landfills are food waste by weight. So that's a lot of food that's just rotting in our landfills. And in the U.S., landfills produce 20% of methane emissions. And methane is a greenhouse gas. It is 20 times more powerful as a greenhouse gas compared to carbon dioxide. So our methane emissions are really important to control. We want to do better at managing those emissions. We want to reduce what's happening at the landfill. We want to reduce food waste that's so let's
Amy, it's Steve, you've cut out.
So you can see the big water consumers here. We have beef at 320 gallons of water per 3-ounce serving. That's our big water consumer on the livestock side. On the plant-based side, we have tree nuts that are almost 100 gallons per 1-ounce serving. And so this is just to show you the difference between livestock water usage versus plant-based foods. So you can get an idea of what it takes to raise either of these types of things. But again, beef, pork, a lot of water usage, and then on the plant side, tree nuts are going to be your biggest. So if you're not eating that hamburger or that steak and you're ending up, contributing to food waste, you're not just throwing out the food itself and that beef serving, you're throwing out a lot of water that was used to produce all of that food. So it sounded like there was some questions coming in. Steve, is there anything pressing we need to answer?
The only thing, Amy, was that your audio cut out for like a minute.
Oh, no.
At the end of the last slide, so I don't know if there was anything you needed to just reiterate.
Okay. At the end of the slide before the water one?
Yes.
Oh, no. Okay. So, I don't know. Well, landfills, okay. So I was talking about how landfills, food waste contributes 22% of landfills by weight, and landfills produce 20% of methane emissions in the U.S. And methane is a very powerful greenhouse gas. It's 20 times more of a contributor to greenhouse gas, the greenhouse effect compared to carbon dioxide. So we need to do better. We need to control our emissions. We need to keep food out of the landfill. All right. Now, I'm sorry. So you guys missed the whole slide about water? Steve? Yes? No? Maybe?
I believe you covered the majority of it, but we do have a question on it. Someone was asking if the water usage takes into account rainfall.
So this slide does not take into, so it's all of the water that's needed to raise one serving of that product. So I don't know if you can see the legend here. So there is the whole water droplet, the big thing, then there's the green water droplet, then there's the blue water droplet in the bottom right corner. And so the green is clean water, that's new water, and then the blue includes rainfall and that kind of thing. And so the total is the total amount of water that you need, but rainfall is included in that in terms of no matter how the water is getting there, this is how much water you need to raise that product. And so it is counted in there. And so this is how much water you need per serving, regardless of how the water is getting there. And I can try to get you a cleaner version of this slide if you're interested in. I can send you the report that it came from if you need to see it better. It's a little unclear. Okay.
All right, thank you.
So, thanks, guys. So let's talk about how much water would be wasted in a typical meal. So let's say you had a hamburger, you had a serving of fries, you had some milk, and you had an apple. That's a nice, well-rounded lunch. And so if you threw away your hamburger, which would include your beef, your cheese, your bun, all the things that you would need for that hamburger, that would be 660 gallons of water. A serving of fries, all the potatoes that we need to raise those fries, 12 gallons. A glass of milk, so our dairy cow, is 45 gallons of water. To raise one apple could be 36 gallons of water. So if you didn't eat any of that meal, that would be 750 gallons of water just thrown away. Now, it's unlikely that you're not going to eat any of that, but just hang with me for this example. So 750 gallons of water. So this is a picture of a cistern, which is holding 750 gallons of water. So it's 6 feet in diameter, and it's more than 5 feet high. But to put that into perspective, a 750-gallon cistern could let you take a shower for more than 6 hours. Now, most people would not take a shower for 6 hours, but just to figure out, to be relative, how much water is this? So there's your cistern. You could take a shower for 6 hours in a typical residential tap water. And so this is just to put it into perspective, how much water are we actually wasting? So this is a lot of water. It takes a lot of water to raise all of the food that we eat. So not just the livestock, but also all the grain, all of the produce, all of the vegetables, all of the things that we eat take a lot of water. So we need to be wise with our food. We need to be aware that we're not just throwing away food when we don't eat that. We're also throwing away other resources, and water is certainly one of those. Okay, I think you get it. So let's move on to energy usage in terms of food waste. So this is a graphic showing how for each person on Earth, annual food waste from the U.S. could power all of these appliances for each person on Earth. So you could run your vacuum cleaner for 8 hours. You could run a TV for 22 hours. You could run a refrigerator for 11 hours. So every single person on Earth could run all of these things with the amount of energy that's associated with food waste in terms of all the energy it took to raise all of that produce and all of that livestock. So let's go back to our meal, our hamburger, our fries. And again, these are all estimates. I can send you the publications if you want to see them. But basically, our little meal here that we threw away would be 12.6 kilowatt hours wasted. So what could we do with all of that energy? You could charge your smartphone every day for more than 6 years with 12.6 kilowatt hours. Okay, that's a lot of charging. So it doesn't seem like a lot, but we could do a lot of things with all of those kilowatt hours. And this is just one meal for one person. So just keep that in mind when you are not finishing those last bites or throwing out your leftovers or throwing away food that you bought that you didn't get to eat because it went bad. You didn't realize it was sitting in your refrigerator. Just keep all of these things in mind. So we are losing resources. We are losing water. We are wasting energy. We need to be more mindful of what's happening. Okay. So let's talk about carbon dioxide emissions. So food waste also has a high carbon dioxide emissions, and if global food waste was a country, it would be the third largest greenhouse gas emitter after the U.S. and China in terms of carbon dioxide. So this is a problem. Obviously, we are already having greenhouse gas effects. We have global warming, we have climate change, we have all kinds of impacts. You may have noticed we had a very warm winter this past season. And so we need to do better. We need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions. So again, let's look at this meal. Let's look at carbon dioxide emissions. So the same meal, hamburger, fries, milk, apple. This meal, if we threw it away, would be the equivalent of 8.35 pounds of carbon dioxide. So what could you do with emitting that much carbon dioxide? You could drive an average vehicle, a little sedan, more than 42 miles if you were going to emit 8.35 pounds of carbon dioxide. That's a lot of miles. That's a lot of resources wasted. We don't want to be generating all of that food, all of those carbon dioxide emissions for nothing. So please don't throw away your food. Be smart. Let's use our resources. And so we're going to talk about some strategies in a minute. But first, I want to also talk about methane emissions. So methane is a problem. It is also a greenhouse gas. And as I had said before, it is much more powerful than carbon dioxide in terms of its warming effects. But 96% of the food we throw away ends up in landfills. Again, 22% of landfill weight is food waste, and landfills produce 20% of methane emissions in the U.S. And the reason that methane is generated is that food is not biodegrading properly in those landfills because there's no oxygen down there. You think, okay, well, here's some food that's biodegradable. Why do I have to worry about that? Well, the problem is that the microbes that normally would break down that food and that organic material, they can't get there. They're not processing properly because you don't have oxygen. And so that's why the methane is being generated. So in a landfill, one head of lettuce could take up to 25 years to decompose because you don't have the oxygen that's necessary for those microbes to be working properly. And so one thing that we could do to reduce methane emissions is to compost all that food waste. And we'll talk about composting in a little bit. But those are some of the environmental impacts of food waste. So we talked about water, we talked about energy, we talked about carbon dioxide, we talked about methane. So now let's talk about what can you do. Let's talk about what we should be doing.
Before you get into that, Amy, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
A few slides back, you had mentioned that 25% of the U.S. freshwater use.
Yes.
Someone was just asking if that was for all production for food, or if that was just the amount that was utilized in the food that winds up getting wasted or lost.
Yeah, so that the 25% of U.S. freshwater use goes to food that's wasted. So it's not what's being grown, it's what's being wasted.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Good. All right, so let's get back to our hierarchy here. So this is the food recovery hierarchy from the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, with the most preferred things to do with food that's not being eaten, down to the least preferred at the bottom. So we have this inverted triangle. So the most preferred thing to do is to feed hungry people, then to feed animals, then industrial uses, composting, and then finally making it to the landfill. So obviously the priorities are to feed people, then feed animals, as we said. But unfortunately, in the U.S., this triangle is the other way around. So most of our food is ending up in the landfill rather than going to all these other uses. So it's not necessarily being reused, it's not being recycled, it's not getting anywhere useful after being wasted, it's ending up in the landfill. So we need to change that. So what can we do? How are we going to tackle this? Well, the USDA and the EPA, the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the Environmental Protection Agency, decided that they were going to set a food loss and food waste goal in the U.S. So in 2015, they called for a 50% reduction of food waste by 2030. So that's very ambitious. There needed to be a baseline set. Like I said, my colleague Sarah has been doing a lot of food waste audits and food waste in schools, trying to figure out what that baseline is. And so this is at the national level. The USDA and the EPA have been working on this, but New Jersey also set this same goal in terms of reducing food waste. So in 2017, New Jersey had set a food loss and food waste reduction goal of 50% by 2030 as well. And both of these goals are aligned with the World Health Organization, and they were targeting schools, hospitals, prisons, larger facilities. And so here is an image from the USDA, reducing food waste in school, things you can do. There's a lot of information, and I will be sending some resources after this is over so that we can you can see more information. You can see all the reports that these statistics are coming from. So I'll send that out to you when this is over. So let's talk about policy. So very recently, New Jersey just passed a new food waste recycling bill. So Governor Murphy actually just signed this bill into law, I think only a couple weeks ago. And so under this new food waste recycling bill, large generators of food waste, so places like hospitals, schools, universities, manufacturers, anyone that's producing food waste in large quantities. So we're talking 52 tons of food waste per year or more. That is the definition of a large generator. They need to recycle their food waste in some way rather than sending that food waste directly to an incinerator or a landfill. So another option is to manage food waste on site with composting operations, or they can ship them to another recycling facility or a composting site. So unfortunately, New Jersey doesn't have that many of these types of food waste recycling facilities. So the law is not going to go into effect for another 18 months. And so the sponsors of the bill were hoping that this would start a new industry in New Jersey. Basically, the law is just signaling that New Jersey is open for business in terms of recycling food waste and getting those types of facilities up and running. And so hopefully, now that this is a requirement and large generators will have to recycle their food waste, this will spur the founding of these new recycling facilities. So hopefully that will be coming online in the next couple months, and it's certainly a problem. New Jersey needs this infrastructure in order to get on the bandwagon of recycling food waste and reusing it, and so hopefully this will help New Jersey keep their food waste out of landfills. Okay, again, this will go into effect in 18 months from now, so they have almost 2 years to work on this. Okay, so that's great. That's what the nation is doing in terms of food waste reduction. New Jersey has jumped on board, but what can you do? So here are some things that you can do at your home and in your life to reduce food waste. So let's talk about these. So, first of all, shop wisely, shop realistically, and meal plan. So basically, before you go to the store, inventory what you have in your cabinets, in your refrigerator, in your freezer. Try to declutter your refrigerator and pantry and try to understand what you actually have rather than going to the store without even knowing what you've got at home. Another thing you can do, don't overserve food. Try to provide small portions, and then if people are still hungry, they can go back for more. Save and eat leftovers. I'm sure you guys, as environmental folks, if you're listening to Earth Day at home, you probably do save and eat your leftovers. But some people, believe it or not, do not. They throw away leftovers. They don't take doggy bags home from restaurants, but this is really important. If you can't finish your meal, please save it for lunch the next day. Don't just throw it out. Those leftovers are good for several days. You could even freeze them so that they can be stored for even longer. So another thing that you could do is to store food in the right places, store it properly. You want to make sure that you have your produce in the right place. Some things go in the refrigerator, some things should be sitting out on the counter. There are vegetables and fruits that emit ethylene gas that helps ripen other foods faster. So you want to keep those away from each other if you are trying to keep your food as long as possible. If you're trying to ripen things, then you could put them together. You could put them all in a bag together so that they emit gas and ripen quickly. But you really want to make sure that you're storing food where it belongs. And then, like I said, avoid clutter. My friend Sarah talks about a first in, first out policy in your refrigerator. So whatever you put in there first, make sure it gets used first rather than the new one that you just bought. You may also want to, like I said, freeze things that you're not going to get to in time. So just be aware of what you have in your freezer, in your fridge. Put put dates on all of the things that you're freezing so you know how long things have been in there. All right, let's see. What else can you do? All right, well, here's a suggestion that can be confusing. Look at food label dates. You may be confused by the best by date, the sell by date, the use by date. All of these things can be confusing to the consumer, especially in things like milk. Excuse me. So the sell by date is a date that's given by the manufacturer to the store to ensure the best quality for that particular food. The best by date, again, is the best quality, the best taste, the most freshness. And use by, again, is also for peak quality. None of those dates are for food safety. They are for food quality and freshness. So just keep that in mind. There are lots of resources about these types of labels, and so I will provide those to you. Sarah, my colleague, has some fact sheets. I will send those out to you, but just be aware that best by, sell by, and use by are just to get you to peak quality. The taste may be slightly off if you use things after those dates, but the food safety is still intact, so you won't have to worry about throwing that stuff away, especially things like dry goods, canned goods. You can keep those for a very long time, so just keep that in mind. Also, one thing that you can do to help reduce food waste is to keep track of what you throw away. If you keep a journal of all of the stuff that you end up tossing because it went bad, you didn't notice it at the back, you opened something but you didn't use it, you didn't finish it in time, if you keep track of that, then you'll start to see how much money you're wasting, all the food that you're throwing out, and it will give you a visual reminder of how much food you've been wasting and what you could do better with. You can also donate to food banks and farms if you have too much food, if you can't get through everything. As discussed in the food hierarchy, feeding animals is one thing that's ahead of even composting or into the landfill. So there are some farms that will take produce that's gone bad. Pigs eat a lot of that stuff. I have a small farm, and our poultry eat quite a lot of things that humans shouldn't be eating. Another thing you can do, you can try canning or pickling. Food preservation is a great way to prolong shelf life. And the Family and Consumer Health Sciences Department at Rutgers Cooperative Extension has lots of information on preserving food. There's a master preserver, master canning class. So again, I will send you information on that. And then finally, you can try composting if you want to try your hand at that. And let me show you that. If you haven't heard of composting, it is a natural process where microorganisms break down materials into simpler substances. And so for your compost pile, you want to make sure that you have brown material, which is dead leaves, branches, and twigs. You want to have green material, which is grass clippings and your food waste. And then you want to have water. And so you just pile all these things together. You have to make sure that those piles have access to oxygen. You need to turn them if you want them to be operating quickly. You could, if you do the passive method, that will work too, but it will take a lot longer for all of those things to turn into compost. You can throw food scraps in there, as we have been talking about, but nothing with meat or grease, because you really don't want that stuff in your compost bin. If you have more questions about composting, my colleague Michelle will be doing a webinar on this as part of our Earth Day at Home series on June 15th. So make sure that you come on in a couple weeks for that. But Michelle will be talking about all kinds of things related to composting. And we also have lots of resources on composting at the Rutgers website, and I'll send those to you as well if you have questions. All right,
Amy.
how are we doing? Steve, yes.
Questions.
Sorry, I got on a roll.
No, that's okay. We do have the poll for everyone to fill out, so if you would like to start that for me, Amy.
Sure.
Everybody
Thank
should
you.
see a poll which has a series of questions just asking for feedback on tonight.
Okay.
So please, it should be open, so feel free to just click on the answers that you so choose. We do appreciate your evaluation and your help in making this program better, so thank you.
Okay, everybody, the poll is open. I see many of you working on it, so thank you for that. We just want to know how we're doing. Okay, so I covered composting. So the bottom line to this whole thing is that food wastes everything. So we talked about wasting water. We talked about how our agricultural land is wasted. It's all that produce and all of our livestock. If the food is wasted, then we've wasted that land as well. We talked about energy, all of the energy that it takes to grow all that food, to transport all that food, to distribute all of that food, to get that to to your table from the field. It takes a lot of energy. But don't forget that there's also a human a human cost involved, excuse me. All the labor that it took to get that food, again, from the agricultural field out to the consumer, that's a lot of man hours. That's a lot of manpower. That's a lot of work to get that food to you, and to throw it away is such a waste of resources. Not to mention all the money that's thrown away when you waste food. So keep that in mind as well. And finally, don't forget all the love that goes into growing all of that food and raising all of that livestock. As a small farmer in New Jersey, I can tell you that a lot of love goes into raising our poultry and raising our meat, our eggs, and all of our produce. So don't take that for granted that people care about the food that you're eating. We try to keep the quality of that food and to make sure that you're getting high quality stuff and all of our produce is up to standard. So don't forget that farmers put a lot of love into everything they're growing. So wasting food wastes everything. So please be aware of the food that you are eating, the food that you're buying, the food that is being thrown away, and think about all the resources that are being wasted, as well as all of those carbon dioxide emissions that are being generated, all of those methane emissions that are being generated, and hopefully you guys have learned something here today, and we'll all try to do better to reduce food waste. And here is some information for you. So here's my email. Please email me if you have questions about the environmental impacts of food waste. And then, like I said, my partner in crime and colleague Sarah is our food policy and food system expert, and she also did a webinar last week on reducing food waste at home from the food policy and nutrition side, and that is recorded, and we can get that out to you if you need that. So please contact me or Sarah if you have any questions, and we will be providing resources and the slide set and the recording of this webinar, so don't be shy and please contact us if you have any questions, and I can take some questions now.
Yeah. Virtual clapping for you, Amy. Good job. There was a question that came in regarding the hierarchy pyramid you had. Someone was asking, why would industrial usage be considered more useful than composting? Because composting is below that use in the hierarchy.
So basically, at the large scale level, they're considered more useful than composting, just because I'm trying to think. So basically people are, in terms of preference, industrial use is ahead of composting just because the industrial use happens very quickly, where composting takes a lot longer. And so the industrial usage has a more immediate realization of using that food, where composting takes longer. But again, we are promoting composting. We do want people to compost, especially at the homeowner level. And as we've seen in New Jersey's legislature, they want this to be done at a larger scale at the facility level, so all the schools, all the prisons, all the hospitals, all those large facilities are going to be composting and recycling their waste. So hopefully we do turn that hierarchy upside down a little bit.
All right, thank you, Amy. Another question had, somebody actually had some suggestions as to what grocery stores and restaurants could do. So I don't know if there's a question to be asked or a way for you to answer. This might be more appropriate for Sarah to respond to, but somebody was asking about just increasing the awareness for people on the so-called ugly fruits and ugly vegetables, so that, you know, they're not pristine carrots, but it's still a carrot. And so how to get those to either food banks or to restaurants. Right. So someone was just looking for basically what are other strategies we could do to inform people about that.
Yeah, so I am not familiar with that, but there has been to make people aware of ugly fruit and to let people purchase those things at a reduced price, or through special markets. Actually, I see a comment here, the Misfits Market. So there has been some movement on that, but I don't know. And maybe, I don't know if Sarah can provide information through the chat. I'm not sure what can be done at the ShopRite, at the grocery store level, aside from data collection and trying to understand purchasing habits of people and to reduce oversupply and things like that. Those are the things that I'm aware of. I'm not sure if there are more advanced things, and I can certainly do some research on that. But yeah, aside from allowing the purchase of those fruits and vegetables that don't quite make the aesthetic standard, I know that those types of places are looking into data analytics and trying to see how people are purchasing, and trying to estimate supply versus demand, and to make sure that they don't purchase too much and that it doesn't end up being thrown away.
And there are also programs that I know that a lot of farmers and other growers participate in doing gleanings, where their food can actually get out to food banks, etc. I know that a lot of master gardeners are involved with that. So there are other means of getting the food out there, so it doesn't actually become a loss or a waste at that point. Okay.
Right.
Right. So someone asked a question about composting meat, and I know that we have our composting class coming up on the 15th of June. I don't know if you want to tackle it, or if you want to save that for that night and have, kind of leave somebody, in anticipation.
Okay. Yeah, so I don't want to steal Michelle's thunder for sure, but you really should not be composting meat because of bacteria issues, E. coli, things like that, and also meat scraps and bones in your compost pile can really attract critters. So you may have rats, you may have raccoons, you may have mice, and so you really should keep meat scraps and bones out of your composting, your composting at home. Now, just to be clear, the big New Jersey food waste recycling bill that I was talking about that just got passed the recycling facilities that the state will be opening will be able to handle bones and food and meat scraps and all of those things. It will be able to handle all food waste, but backyard home composting should not have meat scraps and bones in it.
I just want to remind everybody that the poll is still going on. There's just about 5 minutes left on that, so please feel free to fill that out for us. We really appreciate all your answers. So someone has a question on the New Jersey food waste recycling bill. And they were wondering if that involves perishable items and non-perishable items like vegetables and cans, or is it just the produce itself?
I'm accurate about that. I would have to look into that. I'm not sure if canned items are included in that. I thought that it was produce and, you know, any processed food that's not being used, like meals and things like that, but I don't know about cans. I would have to look into that. I'm not sure.
Okay. I believe I've been gleaning through everybody's questions, and I believe I've hit the biggies for you. So just a reminder to everybody that I did put in the chat the link to the donations page for the environmental stewards. So if you're able to donate to it, that would be fantastic. We will get that information out to you after this webinar as well, next couple of days. But it is in the chat if you would like to click on the link and do that as well. So someone wanted to know about the source reduction in the food hierarchy. What would be some examples of what that would be?
Sure. Yeah. So source reduction is reducing food waste from the beginning. So we're not even generating food waste. You eat everything that you prepare. You eat everything that you purchase. You eat everything at the restaurant. That is source reduction. And I'm sorry that I completely glossed over that. I jumped straight to feeding hungry people. So yeah, source reduction is all of the tips and tricks to reduce food waste at home that I'm talking about. So it's preventing food waste before it even becomes food waste. Just make sure that you are using all the food that you buy, you're eating everything that you make, and there's nothing lost. That is source reduction.
And somebody else was asking what would be some examples of any sort of industrial uses for food waste?
Sure. So some things that would be food waste being used in industry would be production of biofuel, would be using fats, oil, and grease for biofuels or for other processes. Yeah, a lot of biofuel. You can also use all of those things to generate methane that can be used for fuels. Anaerobic digesters can collect that methane that can then be used for all kinds of transportation. It can be used for all kinds of things. So that's what we're looking for. Basically, you're generating biofuels. You are you want that food waste to transform into some kind of usually a biofuel, or let's see, what else could that be used for? That's all that's coming to mind. I'm sorry.
And somebody asked if you could just reiterate what the difference between food loss and food waste was.
Sure. Let me go back since we're here. So food loss is happening during production and processing, and that loss is usually due to poor quality of the produce or damage or spills. And then food waste is occurring at the retail and consumer level. So usually the food is of high quality, but it's discarded because it spoils or it doesn't get used in time before it becomes overripe or, you know, like I said, spoiling. Okay, everybody's hopefully finished with the poll because it's about to close.
Oh, yep, we only have a couple seconds left.
Yeah, but hopefully that clears up food loss versus food waste. Either way, the food is technically being wasted. It's just a technical difference between where the waste is occurring in the food system, you know, in the food production process.
So I'll just go ahead and hit you with one final question. And someone is just asking for an opinion. They would say, would you say that purchasing less processed food helps reduce wasting water and electricity? I'm assuming they're thinking because there's less processing into it.
Yes. Yes, buying fresh foods and making things yourselves, you are definitely using less water and less electricity than at the large scale. All those processed foods usually have a lot of additives put in them. They have a lot of chemicals put into them, and so producing all of those preservatives and all of those things that are added to processed food that definitely require more electricity. So it is more resource conserving to make things at home.
All right. I believe that's pretty much all of our questions for you. So thank you very much, Amy, and thank you all for participating in tonight's webinar. Once again, you know, we are going to be doing this on a weekly basis. Just a reminder that next week will be on Tuesday, the 26th at 6:30 because of the holiday of Memorial Day. So thank you so much. Lots of great feedback coming in on the chat for you, Amy. Great job with everything.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you for the great questions.
Thank you all for participating. We will be sending out an email to everyone, you know, with the slides and additional information. So be on the lookout for that. But everyone, do us all a favor and please stay safe out there in the current situation we're all in. And thank you so much for participating. We really appreciate your answering our questions, asking questions, and also just being here with us tonight. So thank you so much.
Okay.
Okay. So let me stop the recording.